The front page of the Christian Science Monitor Weekly, prayer in school. 50 years after a Supreme Court ban, it makes a comeback. Thank you so much, Lee Lawrence.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
And you can also find that piece on the website, CS Monitor. Let's now go to the House floor. That's all for Washington Journal this morning. Thank you for joining us today. The House is meeting for morning hour, and then at 12 noon they'll take up legislative business. We expect to see first votes around the 1:30, 2 o'clock hour, and last votes hitting about 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock this evening. Have a good day.
The House will be in order. Pursuant to the order of the House of January 3rd, 2013, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour, and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes each. But no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Jones, for 5 minutes.
Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I continue to be disappointed in the House leadership that we are not looking into this issue of the CIA giving tens of millions of dollars to Karzai, the corrupt leader of Afghanistan. We don't hold any hearings about it. We're spending money there. Kids are still dying. In fact, we had 4 killed yesterday. American soldiers were killed in Afghanistan. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Senator Corker from Tennessee for taking the lead on Monday and writing a letter to the Secretary of State, John Kerry, and demanding an explanation of the secret payments by the CIA. I fully agree with the Senator's decision to place a hold on U.S. funding for Afghanistan. Mr. Speaker, we're still having kids killed in Afghanistan, severely wounded, and yet there is no full debate on the floor of the House. That, to me, is a tragedy, that we should be debating the issue of Afghanistan. Mr. Speaker, to make things worse, yesterday in the New York Times, Karzai's office made the following statement, and I quote, "In view of the contradictions between acts and statements made by the United States of America in regard to the peace process, the Afghan government suspended negotiations currently underway in Kabul between Afghan and United States delegation on the bilateral security agreement." Mr. Speaker, it would be my wish that we would just totally scrap the bilateral strategic agreement. That means America would be there for 10 more years after 2014 with a semblance of a military presence and also spending money that we don't have. This is just another failed policy that we in the Congress continue to support. Karzai will not be the remainder, will not last as the speaker, as the leader of Afghanistan. What will happen is the Taliban will eventually take over. They are the Pashtuns that make up the majority of the Taliban. They're the largest tribe in Afghanistan, and they will eventually lead Afghanistan. I do not understand why the Taliban that we're fighting today, who will probably be the leaders in the next 2 or 3 years of Afghanistan, why we're going to support them with finances and with young men and women. There's something wrong here, and I hope that the House of Representatives, the leadership in both parties, will come together and say we're going to debate the policy in Afghanistan. Mr. Speaker, this cartoon that I have, and I've been handing this out in a flyer to members in my district, it's got Mr. Karzai standing in front of a CIA ATM machine, an ATM machine. He's taken his little card, I guess it's paid for by Uncle Sam. He's taking money out, and you can see bags of cash at his feet. The sad thing about it, Karzai says, I'm just making a quick withdrawal, but the sad thing about it is a soldier standing behind him that says, I would like to make a quick withdrawal from Afghanistan. I hope the American people will put pressure on the House and Senate to stop spending money we don't have in Afghanistan, if for no other reason to save the lives of our young men and women who are dying over there each and every week. And I will continue to say, why can a nation that's financially broke continue to pay a corrupt leader to stay in power when he criticizes us in the paper almost every other week? It's time for the Congress to meet its responsibility based on the Constitution and have a debate on this war in Afghanistan. With that, Mr. Speaker, I will yield back by closing. I ask God to please bless our men and women in uniform, to please bless the families of our men and women in uniform. I ask God in His loving arms to hold the families who've given a child dying for freedom in Afghanistan and Iraq. I ask God to bless the House and Senate, that we will do what is right in the eyes of God. I ask God to please bless the President, that he will do what is right in the eyes of God. And I close 3 times by saying, God, please, God, please, God, please continue to bless America. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio, for 5 minutes.
Well, last week I went shopping. I wouldn't exactly call it a spree. What I did is I went to one of the lowest cost grocery stores in the Eugene-Springfield area where I live to try and purchase a week's worth of food for $31.50. That's the SNAP benefit, average SNAP benefit for a single individual. There are those on the other side of the aisle in the Farm Bill that will come up later today say this is the first place to cut. Food assistance to hungry people, to kids, to seniors, to the unemployed, to the disabled. That's where they want to cut first. I wonder how many of them have ever tried to budget for themselves or, say, for their spouse and child at $31.50 per person for a week. Doesn't go too far. In fact, I ended up a little bit over because we miscalculated on the weighing some apples. I had 3 apples, would have had to put 1 back, and would have had to cut back a little bit more on the pasta to make the $31.50 budget limit. Now, there are these incredible stereotypes out there about the SNAP program, the Food Assistance Program, formerly called food stamps, that these are all people on welfare. Well, no, actually, 92% of the people getting SNAP benefits are not on welfare. Half of them are children. 22% are on Social Security or Social Security disability, so they're either seniors or disabled. And the rest are unemployed or underemployed. And at $31.50 a week, a benefit that the other side of the aisle wants to cut, many of these people now can't make it through the month. This is pretty paltry stuff if you look at it, and you think about doing this week in, week out. Most people in Oregon, and Oregon's a lower cost state than many for food, run out sometime in the 3rd week of their benefits, and they have to go to get emergency food assistance. Our food banks provided 1 million boxes of emergency food assistance last year. Yet, those on that side of the aisle would begrudge these people, their children, these seniors, this disabled, an adequate budget, for a very, very minimal diet. You know, it's extraordinary to me. My state, and most people don't think of us this way, we are the 4th highest per capita in terms of food stamp utilization, 4th highest per capita. Because outside our major urban areas, the economy has not recovered from the collapse that Wall Street caused in housing and other areas. We had recreational vehicles, industry's gone. We had some high tech, that's moved on. We had a lot of construction, home building, lumber, wood products, pretty well decimated. The rural areas I have in my rural counties, real unemployment of over 20%. People are struggling to make ends meet. And we're going to cut their benefits. They want to work. Some of them are working. And we even have a higher minimum wage in most states. But it still won't get you through the end of the month for your family. Now, this is just outrageous. There are ways to cut this bill. We're going to stop paying, finally, at last, we're going to stop paying people not to grow things. But now we're going to have a new program of crop insurance, and some estimates are that this program, which goes to anybody with an unlimited income in this bill, that is, if you're a corporate farm and you earn $2 million a year, government is going to pay for 80% of your crop insurance costs, 80% subsidy from the taxpayers. Why is that? We could cut back on the eligibility and say, well, and this would be a pretty big income for any farmer I know of. If you earn over $250,000 a year, go buy your own crop insurance. I think it even could be a little lower than that in my state and in most states. That would save as much money as they're going to save by eliminating food assistance to hungry kids, seniors, unemployed, and underemployed and disabled Americans. These are the cruelest cuts possible. I would urge my colleagues to support the amendment later today, which will restore these benefits.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, there is a war going on in Syria. Some call it a civil war. It may be a civil war, may have started out as a civil war, but it is escalating. The government of Syria, ruled by the dictator Assad, is a bad guy, no question about it. Several rebel groups, we're still not sure who all these people are trying to remove him from power. World powers seem to be taking sides in this battle. You have the Syrian government supported by Iran and Russia. They also have this little terrorist group called Hezbollah supporting the regime. But on the other side, you've got the rebels, numerous groups, including Al-Qaeda, a terrorist group. You've got Saudi Arabia, Qatar. You've got the Muslim Brotherhood from Egypt supporting the rebels. Turkey is concerned. And then even Great Britain has weighed in on this, a former colonial power in the region. And so more and more groups, nations are lining up in this war in Syria that's been going on for 2 years. 100,000 people have been killed by both sides. Refugees are leaving the country and going to other countries. I recently was in Turkey on the border with Turkey and Syria, and I saw a refugee camp that had 150,000 Syrians that had escaped the war in Syria. And finally now, the United States, after 2 years, we've decided we're going to take sides. The President has said we're going to give arms to the Syrian rebels, and that they're going to be vetted so we make sure that we're not giving those to other terrorist groups. I don't know if we're going to do a universal background check on the rebels or what, but small arms for the rebels. And here's what the President said. We're not taking sides in this religious war between Shia and Sunni. Really what we are trying to do is take sides against extremists of all sorts. Well, it seems to me what we are really doing is taking both sides, and we're arming extremists at least in one side. And I ask the question, what is the national security interest of the United States to be involved in somebody else's war? There isn't one. We don't have a national security interest to be involved in this war. You know, the United States seems to have a habit of getting involved in other people's business. And once again, we have made the problem in Syria our problem by being involved and supporting the rebel groups. What is the goal of the United States involvement? This war is not going to be easily won by the rebels. Are we going to then add more military power to the rebels? But what's the end game? What is the goal here? To put another rebel group in power in another country? You know, we've kind of forgotten what we did in Libya. There's Omar Gaddafi, the bad guy of Libya, no question about it, horrible person. So what does the United States do? We support the rebels who overthrow the Libyan president, Libyan dictator. And we send small arms. You know, Mr. Speaker, those small arms are still in North Africa, and they've spread all over North Africa. We don't know what has happened to those weapons that the United States gave to those rebels. Only time will tell. But yet, this is not our war, but we seem to be very interested in supporting this, as the President correctly said, a religious war. You got the Shiites and you've got the Sunnis. They've been at each other since the year 630, and they haven't resolved their conflicts, and yet here a century and a half later another conflict is involved. It's a religious war between two groups. In the Middle East it is escalating. The United States' national interest is not at stake. What the United States should do and work for is a political resolution to this problem, not a military solution to this problem, and do what we can to resolve it politically and help really both sides resolve it. But this is not our war, Mr. Speaker. We have no national security interest. There's no American goal. We don't know the goal. We don't know the end result. And we don't even know who we are arming as those rebels, who made up of criminals, patriots, Al-Qaeda. We ought to not be involved in this war that has no national security interest for the United States. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise to express support for the Pitts, Davis, Goodlatte, and Blumenauer amendment to the Agriculture Bill. Our amendment to H.R. 1947, the Federal Agricultural Reform and Risk Management Act of 2013, will not repeal the sugar program. It only seeks to reform it. We have farm programs for wheat, corn, cotton, and many other crops. These programs give direct assistance to farmers and allow market prices to be set by supply and demand. Farmers receive help, but not at the expense of workers and consumers. The sugar program is different. It helps sugar producers by hurting other people, and that's just not right. There are other ways sugar farmers who may need help to receive assistance without embracing an outdated system of strict government controls that cost consumers $3.5 billion per year in higher prices and over 112,000 lost jobs in the sugar-using industries in the last decade. During fiscal year 2011, the wholesale price for U.S. refined beet sugar averaged 55.8 cents per pound. This is considerably higher than the average recorded cost during the 5-year period covered by the 2002 Farm Bill provisions for FY 2003 and FY 2007, which was 27.6 cents per pound. Last month, the average price for U.S. refined beet sugar was 26.3 cents a pound, whereas the average world refined sugar price was 21.9 cents per pound. Historically, our sugar program keeps our markets higher, regardless of demand and our supply, compared to world prices for sugar. The U.S. manufacturers who use sugar as an ingredient to produce processed foods and drinks are having to always pay more domestically than manufacturers overseas. This is the exact reason why candy companies are moving to countries like Canada, Mexico, and other offshore places. We need an industry that is subject to capital market forces without government intrusion, that place quotas on the amount of sugar that can be grown in the United States and restricts access to foreign-grown sugar. The current sugar program benefits 4,714 sugar farmers in the United States, while threatening the jobs of 600,000 workers in sugar-using industries and thus imposing a hidden tax on every American consumer. The Pitts, Davis, Goodlett, and Blumenauer Amendment would lower the price support loan rate in accordance to historic levels and reduce taxpayers' liability for keeping prices high, save taxpayers money, allow more sugar imports, and provide the U.S. Department of Agriculture more flexibility to modify domestic marketing allotments. Making changes to the sugar program will help level the playing field and provide sugar-based manufacturers much-needed resources to keep people employed and modernize their production facilities. Let's not help the few at the expense of the many. Vote yes for the Pitts, Davis, Goodlett, and Blumenauer Amendment. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the Farm Bill is now before us. It's a measure originating in the House of Representatives whose majority was elected on a clear mandate to stop wasting money. Yet all this bill does is continue to waste money. Yes, it tightens up a little on automatic eligibility for food stamps, and that's a good thing. Yet this modest reform is a poor substitute for the complete overhaul that is desperately needed. The food stamp program, now called SNAP, was originally intended to provide basic commodities to the truly needy. Yet I cannot count the number of constituents who have complained to me over the last several years about standing in a grocery line and watching the person in front of them use SNAP cards to buy luxuries that these hard-working taxpayers could not themselves afford. But it is the corporate welfare provisions that this bill continues and in some case expands that I find the most offensive. Yes, the bill shifts us away from direct payments to farmers, but it instead grossly expands taxpayer-subsidized crop insurance programs, eating up about 3/4 of the savings the supporters purport to achieve. The practical effect is to guarantee profits to farmers while shifting their losses to taxpayers. We're told that if the bill fails, these wasteful programs will continue with no reform. Well, actually, many of the most wasteful programs would expire, like the $150 million to advertise farmers' markets. But the fine point of it is this. If this bill is defeated, the House can take up real reform at any time. If it is passed, we kick that can another 5 years down the road. To those who say this is a small step in the right direction, I would agree. It is a very small step. It makes tiny and modest changes to an utterly atrocious program. According to the CBO, it would save all of 3.4% from the baseline over the next 5 years, hardly a crowning achievement for fiscal reform. But there's no blinking at the fact that these programs are fundamentally unfair and grossly wasteful, and this bill locks them into law for another 5 years. If the supporters of this bill were actually serious about incremental reform, this would be a 1-year authorization with additional reforms planned next year. It most decidedly is not. Let me explain clearly what this bill means to an average, hard-working, tax-paying family in my district. That family must struggle and scrimp to keep their shop open. They bear the entire financial risk of failure, and their profits, if there are any, are heavily taxed. A portion of that family's taxes goes to the agriculture industry for the express purpose of inflating the prices that family must pay at the grocery store. As a result, when the family goes grocery shopping, it must scrimp again in order to bear these artificially higher prices that have been forced up by their own high taxes. As that family stands in the checkout line with their ground chuck for the barbecue tonight, They watch SNAP cards used by others to pay for premium steaks that family can't afford for itself, but paid for by that family's own high taxes. If the economy sours, that family bears its own losses, while it also pays to cover the losses of the same agricultural interest responsible for their pain at the grocery store. The bill before us continues this travesty for another 5 years, with soothing assurances from its supporters to cheer up, things could be worse. Well, actually, things couldn't be much worse, and they could be a whole lot better. This bill, for example, could be defeated and replaced with genuine reform. The government could be withdrawn from its corrupt interventions in agricultural markets. The food stamp program could be restored to its original purpose to provide basic commodities to the truly needy. And individual consumers could be free to determine the price of their groceries by the decisions that they make every day over what to spend at the grocery store, and not on the basis of what deals were cut in Congress. The Roman writer Phaedrus summed up this bill rather neatly 20 centuries ago. He said, "A mountain was in labor, sending forth dreadful groans, and there was in the region the highest expectation. After all that, it brought forth a mouse." I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Kilmer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to discuss the damage from Congress's inability to do its job and pass a budget, and the unreasonable lengths that folks have to go to cover for the reckless policy of sequestration. As I said the very first time I spoke in this chamber, Congress should be doing all it can to replace the across-the-board cuts caused by sequestration with a balanced, bipartisan, long-term budget. Cutting across the board is not a strategy. In fact, it's anti-strategic. Unfortunately, this Congress has been stuck in park when it comes to working toward a long-term budget. In fact, Congress has only passed 13 bills in 6 months, none of them dealing with jobs, and none of them working to replace these non-strategic cuts. Congress needs to understand the impacts of its dysfunction. In my district, we see those consequences every day. I'm a member of the House Armed Services Committee, and I'm proud to represent several military installations, including Naval Base Kitsap and Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, and I represent many men and women who work at Joint Base Lewis-McChord. The Navy, in fact, is the largest employer in my district. I'm frequently copied on emails from civilian Navy workers who are resigning because of the disarray caused by Congress, the threat of furloughs, and the loss of cost of living adjustments. Workers often choose those jobs despite lower salaries because they love their country and they want to protect it. Also, government offers stability that the private industry often can't. But these workers no longer feel valued. And thanks to Congress, working at the shipyard doesn't even offer stability anymore. It's affecting the morale of our workers and the ability of our shipyard to execute its mission. Here's a direct quote from a manager who contacted me. He wrote, "We will have problems retaining professionals if this fiscal environment continues. We will have trouble accomplishing our current workload, let alone providing any level of increased engineering support." Mr. Speaker, this will only cost us more in the long run. This dysfunction in Congress is directly responsible for good workers walking away and is threatening the mission of the United States Navy. It also affects the local contractors and small businesses in my district that support these missions. They're already facing sweeping layoffs and tremendous uncertainty. Here's another example. Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in my district, while mostly spared from furloughs under sequestration, still is limited in its ability to fill jobs made vacant by attrition. The hiring freeze went into effect right as they were planning on adding 600 workers. The shipyard has the work, our region needs the jobs. They've only recently announced that they can slowly hire to cover for some attrition. Because of these constraints, Puget Sound Naval Shipyard has resorted to asking anyone, upper-level staff, anybody who has carried a tool bag or used a wrench to help deliver 3 submarines and an aircraft carrier back to the fleet. That's a testament to the lengths people are going to cover for such an insane policy like sequestration. We're seeing the same thing at Joint Base Lewis-McChord, where 10,000 civilian employees have received notice of furlough. It's affecting military training, where we've seen rotations to the National Training Center canceled. General Brown at Joint Base Lewis-McChord told our local paper, and I quote, "It is a huge impact on training. Where is the fine line," he asked, "where you go from being the best in the world to second best?" It's not right that Congress doesn't have their backs on this. We have got to stop this policy. From my perspective, from the perspective of the folks who have to deal with this damaging policy every day, it doesn't matter who's to blame for the idea of sequestration. All that matters is that both parties work together to stop it. Every day that this Congress doesn't work on coming together on a balanced long-term budget is another day that folks around our country have to cover for Congress's dysfunction. Democrats and Republicans need to work together on this. This doesn't make sense for the folks in my district who face losing up to 20% of their pay, or for the folks in my district who can't apply for an open job because of our budget uncertainty. It doesn't make sense for the kids in Head Start programs who are hurt by sequestration. We should stop these across-the-board cuts for them, too. The right solution is for Congress to replace these cuts altogether with a balanced long-term budget. I am ready to work with both parties to get this done, for our national security, for our economy, and for the American people who deserve better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from West Virginia, Ms. Capito, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A couple of weeks ago, we began the 150 Reasons to Love West Virginia project to honor our state's 150th birthday, which is tomorrow. We asked West Virginians to send us what they love about the Mountain State, and they delivered. Many people cited West Virginia's strong heritage and rich history as reasons to love our state. We all know that West Virginia is rooted in the values of hard work and the respect of our neighbors. I love how West Virginia friends are for a lifetime. My family's history is deeply rooted in the state of West Virginia, and I love that. I love the state's nicknames, Wild and Wonderful, Almost Heaven. David Stoffel said, and I quote, "We are a collection of communities joined by a common trust, respect, love, and willingness to help our neighbor. Once you are a mountaineer, you'll always be a mountaineer." Anita Keaton wrote that small, quaint towns throughout West Virginia like Thomas and Thurman are the, quote, heart and soul of our great state. It all began on June in 1861 when a group of pro-Union Virginians met in Wheeling, West Virginia. Together they created the restored government of Virginia, which sought to rebuild ties with the Union. On April 20th, West Virginia became the only state in the Union to acquire its sovereignty by proclamation of the President of the United States. And that President was Abraham Lincoln. And on June 20th, 1863, 150 years ago tomorrow, we formally joined the Union. As a community flourishes, it gives birth to local myths and legends. We tell stories to our children so they can someday tell those same stories to their children. West Virginia has its fair share of true stories and legends. We have Mothman, and we also have a tale of the Hatfield and McCoy feud, which is a story of family honor, justice, and vengeance. We have very well-respected West Virginians who are here today with us. Chuck Yeager, Jerry West, Mary Lou Retton, Jessica Lynch, Jennifer Garner, and a gentleman who shares my hometown, a very small town in West Virginia of Glendale, Mr. Brad Paisley. Pioneer stories like the Hatfields and McCoys have been passed down from generation to generation, as noted by Deb Walliser. These legends bring the people of West Virginia together. They allow us to put aside our differences and share a common bond in our heritage. That strong-knit community is also built through events like the one I've attended many times, and one time with President Bush, the 4th of July celebration parade in Ripley, West Virginia. As Tracy Wolford Kelly mentioned, she loves the parade in Ripley. Symphony Sundays, the Forest Festival, or attending a Mountaineer football game on a crisp fall evening. All victories are welcome. West Virginia is not only rich in history, it is rich in natural beauty. From quote, trout fishing the Cranberry and Williams River, as Joe Belcher noted, or West Virginia's, quote, beautiful vistas of tree-covered mountain, as mentioned by Emmett Pepper of Charleston, there are many reasons to love and enjoy our state's scenic beauty. West Virginia is a peaceful place. These images and places make the changes in seasons particularly beautiful, which Robin Barnett says looks like, quote, God's coloring book. They also bring family and friends together, as Connie Sherman of Moorfield, West Virginia mentioned, talking about the Trow River. Whether it is simple things like West Virginia pepperoni rolls or the coal fields and natural gas that power our economy, there's so much to love about the state we call home. For 150 years, its country roads have provided the men and women who have traveled them with a sense of comfort and pride. And we all do, no matter where we are in the country or around the world. We all like to sing the John Denver song, Almost Heaven, West Virginia, which, by the way, my granddaughter can sing from front to back. While these anecdotes about why we love West Virginia only touch on what makes our state so great, I want to thank you and the folks in West Virginia for celebrating with me. There will be celebrations all throughout the state over the next several days. I love West Virginia, and I'm honored to serve the citizens of an outstanding state. So from me to you, happy 150th birthday, West Virginia. Thank you.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Chu, for 5 minutes.
I rise today to introduce the San Gabriel Watershed Restoration Act of 2013. This bill could revitalize the California urban river by directing the Army Corps of Engineers to prepare a study analyzing the current state of the San Gabriel River watershed and how it can be transformed into a destination for Los Angeles County. We have such incredible resources right in our backyard in the San Gabriel Valley, and at the heart is the San Gabriel River. That is why we must do all that we can to revitalize and protect this space. My communities are desperate for more open spaces to run, play, and explore. The LA River is one of the most park-poor in the country. The San Gabriel River, only steps from our homes, used to be a green, lush paradise. The local Gabrielino tribespeople used to canoe down its waters out to the sea. But today, in its current state, it feels more like an abandoned waterway than the majestic river it once was. There are so few places for families to sit and enjoy or to swim in its cool waters on unbearably hot summer days in the urban valley cities. The San Gabriel River also performs essential flood protection, drinking water recharge, and stormwater conservation functions. But it is inaccessible to local residents for recreation and lacks many natural and riparian ecosystems. Additional provisions for flood control and water quality control are also sorely needed. Increasingly, residents have expressed the desire to rediscover the river and offer more of its benefits to all the communities along its route. That's why I introduced this bill in the 111th Congress to study how we can improve the river and expand its use, and that is why I'm introducing this bill again. The study created in this bill would look at the best ways to revitalize the watershed, focusing on ecosystem restoration, outdoor recreation enhancements, and ways to conserve rainwater and keep our water clean. This vital project is a first step that is long overdue toward creating more outdoor space within the highly urbanized watershed communities so that people can enjoy this beautiful resource in a safe and sustainable way. A similar study and demonstration project were critical steps in the effort to revitalize the Los Angeles River. And it was so successful that now there are regular kayaking trips on the LA River, a place many thought of as only a concrete wasteland. people can actually enjoy this little bit of nature again. This is a powerful testament to the potential and growing success of river revitalization efforts. My communities have a vision to create an emerald necklace, a 17-mile loop of multi-benefit parks connecting 10 cities along the Rio Hondo and San Gabriel rivers. This bill is a critical part of realizing this dream, and I call on my colleagues in Congress to support this bill and help make their vision a reality for generations to come.
Gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, as we come to the House floor this morning, many communities across the West suffer from severe wildfires, and they're having a more devastating impact due to extreme drought conditions this year. In my home state of New Mexico, firefighters have bravely worked to battle a number of blazes, and I extend my sincerest thanks for their tireless efforts. With global climate change contributing to drier and hotter summers and more intense fire seasons, it is critical that we take steps to address the root causes of climate change before it gets too late. And while we should focus on the steps we must take to reduce greenhouse gases and encourage every conservation, we must also ensure that we're preparing for the drought conditions that will continue to impact our communities in the years to come. The National Integrated Drought Information System is an important tool in this effort. This program collects and consolidates drought-related data and information. It operates regional drought early warning system pilot projects across the country. Authorization for this program is currently scheduled to end this year. That is why I'm working in a bipartisan effort to reauthorize the National Integrated Drought Information System for another 4 years. This will enable the federal government to further develop regional drought early warning systems and identify research, monitoring, and forecasting needs that can help farmers and firefighters alike. Because whether it's growing crops and raising livestock or battling wildfires in the West, drought conditions in the coming years will continue to pose challenges for our communities. And we'll need to do all we can to assist those whose lives and livelihoods are impacted by climate change. Mr. Speaker, today I'm also offering an amendment to be able to provide grant authorization to many small, predominantly Hispanic communities across northern New Mexico that are in these areas where these waterways have been carved through our mountains, through our watersheds, to provide opportunity to small farmers, rural communities all across New Mexico called acequias. For many years, local farmers in New Mexico have been asking for an amendment that would allow acequia and community ditch associations to access EQIP funds. And acequia is a centuries-old irrigation structure that is still in use today, providing opportunities for many private landowners all across New Mexico and southern Colorado. The Board of Private Landowners, also called the Acequia and Community Ditch Association, is in charge of administering maintenance of the irrigation infrastructure, which often requires work on sections of the ditch of the acequia on private land. These small community ditch associations do not have the authority to levy taxes, and that's why I'm asking for members to please consider and offer your support on this amendment today. Members who are watching and tuning in to C-SPAN this morning, as well as offices, please take a look at this amendment. We need your help in New Mexico, and our farmers would certainly appreciate the kind support of members of Congress. So thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. We have a lot of work to do. Now let's make sure we can get this done on behalf of people that are struggling and working all across America today.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Ray Hall, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I join with my colleagues from the state of West Virginia in celebrating our state's 150th birthday tomorrow. We invite the rest of the nation to join in our revelry and reflection. Ours is a proud history of doing our part and then some in service to this great nation of ours. West Virginia was born of war, and West Virginians understand full well the price of service and sacrifice to defend our shores. In times of war, the Mountain State's sons and daughters have answered their country's call faithfully, honorably, and nobly. And in times of peace, we have continued to serve our nation from our mountains and our hollows. Geologists tell us Our ancient mountains, sharp peaks, in ages long past were rounded and smoothed through the forces of nature over the eons of time. The result satisfies the soul. Thanks to the U.S. Postal Service, the world can get a glimpse of our majestic mountains on a new stamp commemorating our 150 years. Based on a photograph taken in Pocahontas County, West Virginia, that stamp stands as a testament to our bragging about being almost heaven and every inch legitimate. Those same mountains, Mr. Speaker, have honed and hewn a people for whom the phrase "mountaineers are always free" is more than a state motto. It is a way of life. West Virginians may be somewhat stubborn when it comes to asking for help for themselves, even if life itself depends on it. But they are the first in line to offer help and assistance to their neighbors. And in West Virginia, Mr. Speaker, we go a step further. I doubt we have ever known a stranger in any of our 55 counties. If you need help, West Virginians are there for you. The charitable spirit of West Virginia is built on rock-solid principles. First and foremost, you will find an abundance of faith among those who dwell in our mountains, faith in the Almighty. Families from the core of our lives with West Virginia parents, families form the core of our lives with West Virginia parents and grandparents putting their children and grandchildren first. And you figure in that a big dose of loyalty to our hills and hollows, our family traditions, our common heritage, and our many unique histories, and you begin to see why hard times cannot keep us down. Like most of Americans, West Virginians are in the midst of a transitional economy. But a new dawn is breaking. We have harnessed positive change while holding on to much that makes West Virginia unique, enabling us to attract new and promising ventures. Witness the 100-year commitment of the Boy Scouts of America, almost $500 million investment in a Fayette County Scouting Reserve adjacent to the largest federally protected system of rivers east of the Mississippi. Recently, Wayne Perry, the Boy Scouts national president, when commenting on our rugged but inviting mountain venues, said, and I quote, "We thank God made West Virginia for the Boy Scouts of America," end quote. Mr. Speaker, I have news for my colleagues and their constituents. We have more room at the inn. This may be our 150th birthday celebration, but West Virginia is still wild and even more wonderful than ever before. So I say to all, come and visit us soon. To my fellow West Virginians, may I say a happy 150th, and be assured, as long as there is still one mountaineer heart beating, there will always be a West Virginia. I yield back, balance my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes. Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to remind my colleagues in the House of two very important words for the American people: unfinished business. The American people, by their voices that we hear as we go back to our district, challenge us in unfinished business. 2 days ago, I stood with Mothers That Demand Action in my district to stand with their children, their babies in strollers, these mothers who love America, who are patriots, to stand alongside of the mourning families of Sandy Hook and to read the names of the 26 who died almost more than 6 months ago, to ask for the passage of universal background checks, and to ask the question why the Armed Citizens Project needed to arm citizens in Houston. We know that the area that they attempted or are arming is an area where they felt intimidated not by their government to take over, but because of crime. I look forward to meeting with those citizens to be able to address the issue of crime in their neighborhood. But we stood against the kind of arming citizens as a response to gun violence. and I have no qualms of standing against that and working with my neighbors to ensure the safety of their neighborhoods, but to move forward on sensible gun legislation to prevent gun violence, unfinished business. And then the question of the National Security Agency and the phone calls and numbers of our American citizens. We in Congress must be challenged to rein that in, balance it with the need for national security, which I promote and support as a member of the Homeland Security Committee. And so I'll be introducing legislation to assess the use of outside contractors, 70% of federal dollars going to that in the intelligence community, and reducing those numbers by 2014, establishing more openness on the FISA court, but making sure that we don't interfere with operations and operatives that are making our country secure. And to be able to say to Mr. Snowden, I won't call you a name, but I know what you did in certain instances is wrong, and you must stand up under the laws of this nation. And then to be able to say that today, as we go forward on the Farm Bill, to be able to ask the question, why are we taking $20 billion away from the Supplemental Nutrition Program, from seniors, from young children, from babies, when this is a lifeline, from young Army recruits, or those in the United States military, rather, who are on food stamps. I also want to say to my community that we need to get ready to enroll in health care, which is going to be a major step in making America healthy. To the business, the small business community, this is going to help you provide your employees, your one employee, your two employees, health care. That is something, unfinished business. Then I want to thank the U.S. Postal Service, the letter carriers, the people who put our mail through, who help small businesses. We've got to fix this problem with the U.S. Postal Service, make sure that they're stable, financially able. The rural post offices, let's not close anymore. This is the infrastructure of America. It's a job creator. And then to our students, many of them who have graduated, we have got to fix the problem of the increasing or the major increase in student interest rates that are going to burden our parents and students. 6.8% by July 1st. But Congress can do better. We need to be able to join in the legislation that I've signed on to be able to keep that interest rate at 3.4%. Unfinished business, Mr. Speaker. The American people want jobs. They don't want sequestration. They want the right kind of comprehensive immigration reform that has reasoned border security, but not to criminalize those students who wanted to do nothing else but to go into the United States military, called dream children, who wanted to be able to serve the nation, who wanted to work and give back to this country. Let us not go down that pathway. Let's have the kind of value-based comprehensive immigration reform and border security legislation that was passed out of the Homeland Security Committee, which I was proud to be a co-sponsor, an original co-sponsor, coming out of the Border Security and Maritime Committee. Unfinished business. Guns, preventing gun violence, reining in the issue of intelligence, balancing it with civil liberties, putting back in the supplemental nutrition, some $20 billion, making sure that Americans are enrolled in health care under the Affordable Care Act, supporting the Postal Service, and, Mr. Speaker, finally, supporting our students. Unfinished business. It's time to get to work, creating jobs in America.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Wilson, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the American people are now in the 899th day of a scandal that is truly worse than Watergate. Yet, this scandal has nothing to do with Cincinnati or the AP or Benghazi or even NSA. It's the scandal of this Republican Congress failing to bring a single serious bill to address our unemployment crisis to the floor for a vote. The tens of millions of people affected by this scandal are not constantly on television drawing attention to their plight. They're too busy looking for work. They're not hiring lobbyists to press for change. They're too busy figuring out how they're going to pay for their next meals, for the roofs over their heads, or for their children's college tuition. Mr. Speaker, this scandal, unlike so many other scandals in history, is one that you can end instantly. You have the power to bring the Jobs Now Act to the floor for a vote. It deserves a vote. Mr. Speaker, the only scandal that matters to the American people right now is this Congress's failure to address unemployment. Our mantra should be jobs, jobs, jobs for the American people. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
The House returns at noon Eastern for legislative work, resuming consideration of the Farm Bill. They'll consider 103 amendments. The underlying bill sets out policies over 5 years for farmer subsidies, crop insurance, and nutrition programs. Again, live coverage of the House at noon. Live over on C-SPAN 2, the U.S. Senate continues its work on the immigration bill. Today, they'll consider additional proposed amendments, including several addressing border security issues. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has said he may be forced to file cloture on the bill by week's end in order to get the bill to a final conclusion by the 4th of July recess. The Senate's live now on C-SPAN 2. Meanwhile, the Congressional Budget Office reported yesterday that if enacted, the Senate bill currently being debated would decrease the federal budget deficits by $197 billion over 10 years. The government would pay out $262 billion, but those costs would be offset by an estimated $459 billion in revenues, largely from new income and payroll taxes. The report also examined the impact on the U.S. population, estimating an increase of 10.4 million residents over 10 years, with 1.6 million more temporary workers and 1.6 million fewer unauthorized residents. You can read that entire report, by the way. We've linked to it on our website at cspan.org. Well, over the last couple of days, President Obama, of course, was in Northern Ireland Monday.